So Pasek and Paul, you guys received your career first Emmy nomination for penning an original song to A Christmas Story Live. It's actually based on a musical that you guys had already written songs for and received a Tony nomination for your work on that. Did you ever think that when you were doing the Broadway play, one day you'd be talking about it in terms of Emmy nominations?
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's you know, when we first found out about the show, it was happening in Seattle at a regional theater there, and our hope was to get involved with it there. And they said, look, there's no guarantees that it will ever go on or ever be, you know, anything more than that. But you know, if you guys can, and it was kind of a last minute thing. We were a replacement at the time, and so said, if you guys can write the songs by this time and go into rehearsals, you know, we'll see how it goes. And so that was in 2010, I think. And so been a long journey from there, and certainly never imagined where it would end up.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the song that you guys are nominated for at the Emmys. It's called "In the Market for a Miracle." How did it come? You guys composed 2 brand new songs for the TV adaptation. Is that correct?
We actually worked on 3.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a bit about this one, and I guess specifically why, you know, for the TV adaptation, you guys felt the need to, you know, add some new stuff to it.
Well, this is the first time that we've ever worked on a live television broadcast, and so the format is really different. We came to realize than working on a Broadway show or working on a film, in that commercial breaks are really important, and then you have to build these moments where, you know, the song needs to give you a climactic moment before you cut to commercial, and it needs to be in a, you know, sort of a 3-hour form with commercials. So we really needed to figure out how to create a narrative that would sustain itself and that we could have enough emotional, you know, peaks and valleys that it could really work as a live television event. So we were trying to come up with concepts for what could, you know, work as a big, fun, exciting number. And, you know, we were really always struck by the fact that in the original movie of A Christmas Story, there's a family named the Schwartz family in, you know, 1940s Indiana. And we always thought that was a little bit strange that there was this family, you know, named the Schwartzes, and they don't comment on it at all in the film. And when we did the Broadway adaptation, we gave a slight reference to potentially their Judaism, in that, you know, the dogs eat the turkey and the family has to go to a Chinese restaurant. And in our Broadway stage adaptation, who do they run into at this Chinese restaurant on Christmas? But the Schwartz family, because that's what Jews do on Christmas. And so we were really excited to think about how could we expand that for this particular live broadcast. And Justin, you want to talk about Anna getting involved?
Yeah, see, we were thinking about, you know, characters that could use some fleshing out and how to sort of expand the story a little bit. And honestly, part of it was also creating exciting dynamic moments for actors. And a name that came up early on was Anna Gasteyer. And the idea was to create a big number for her. And it sort of all just started to make sense that she could play Mrs. Schwartz. We could really come up with a number for Mrs. Schwartz. And, you know, in our sort of also desire to really make it the point that this show is ultimately about families and how insane the holidays are with families, whatever holiday you happen to be celebrating. You know, there's no reason that there shouldn't be a Hanukkah song or something like that. And so we said, well, we could write this Hanukkah song and Anna Gasteyer could sing it. And it's sort of all the pieces started to come together. We talked with her, and part of convincing her to do the telecast was, hey, we'll write a song for you. It could be this big, fun, hot. We were pitching it out. We didn't really know what it was going to be yet, but it'll be big and fun and loud and Hanukkah. And she was like, I love that. You know, I do this thing in my club act. Because she said, you know, what's it going to be like? And we were sort of like spitballing, like sort of like dancing on our feet a little bit. And she was like,
for her to do it, so we were just making up. We were like, oh.
Yeah, we were like, it'll be great, and it'll be this, like lots of pizzazz and all this stuff. And she was like, well, you know, it's interesting. In my club act, she does club act as a dated term, but she has sort of a cabaret show that she does with a fantastic band and all this, and she entertains all over the country. And she's really, truly a phenomenal singer. as you can see watching the song. And she said, you know, a thing that I do in my show is I have this sort of little section where I do sort of a klezmer jazz thing. And we were like, okay, well, it can be klezmer jazz. That sounds great. And we were like, I don't know what that is.
I've never really heard the term klezmer jazz before, but we thought, you know what, if Anna Gasteyer likes it, then we can figure out klezmer jazz.
Yeah, so let's do it.
And you know, the other part of it too is that working on the Broadway show for A Christmas Story takes many, many years to develop a Broadway show. And I remember always being, we would always be working on it around, you know,
in the early fall, September, August, September, October.
And every year my mom would call me and she would say, you know, where are you going for the high holidays? You know, where are you going for Rosh Hashanah, Benj? Where are you going for Yom Kippur? And every year for 4 years, I would have to answer her, Mom, I'm not going to synagogue. I'm actually working on Christmas songs. And she was like, oh my God. So like, I brought such shame to the household. And so this was a really great opportunity.
You're restoring honor. Now you restored honor.
Restoring honor, because I could finally say, you know what, Mom, this year I'm writing the Hanukkah song. I'm writing the Hanukkah number. And so she's very happy.
You said something kind of interesting. I just wanted to kind of ask you a bit more about, which is, you know, how do you approach writing songs for characters? Can you talk a bit more about how you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think for us, because we come from the world of theater, we're really focused on how a song is going to fit into a plot and how it's going to progress narrative. And so we really didn't know how to crack this this number in particular until we figured
there were a lot of ideas that came about that was like, this would be a fun idea for a Hanukkah number. This would be a fun idea for a Hanukkah number. We had sort of a bunch of ideas, and then we're like, but here's the thing. Everything in this show keeps having to relate back to Ralphie wants this gift for Christmas, and how is he going to get it? And he keeps having the door slammed in his face. Everybody's saying, "Oh, you'll shoot your eye out. You'll shoot your eye out." So it was like, okay, how can we start to think of a number, conceptualize something that can still fit onto that track of Ralphie's quest?
Yeah, and so we thought there's a great moment where Ralphie dares. Or where Flick is dared to stick his tongue to the flagpole by Schwartz, and they get in trouble.
Everyone remembers that moment, yeah.
You know, and so it came pretty naturally that, you know, Ralphie and Schwartz kind of feel guilty about having done this, and Ralphie puts the blame on Schwartz, and then to sort of apologize to Schwartz, he goes over to the Schwartz's house, and in that moment, you know, the Mrs. Schwartz can sort of realize how despondent and sad Ralphie is because he thinks that his dreams are light years away. And she can tell him that even if you don't think that miracles can come true, in a Jewish household on Hanukkah, miracles can still happen. And that's, you know, the story of the Maccabees. So giving it to this nice Christian boy on the Jewish holiday, we felt like was a really fun moment that we could create.
Right. Talk a bit more about the way you two work together. I mean, you've done a lot of shows and movies, so you've written quite a few songs. How has the process developed since the first time you guys started working together? What's it like now?
Well, you're assuming something by saying how has it developed. It may not have developed at all. It's
devolved. If
it's done, yeah, it's done something. No, you know, as Benj was saying, sort of everything, most of the time we're writing something, it's always ultimately going back to story and plot and character and what's happening. So in a way, we mostly the same way in terms of let's really get inside what this moment is, how it connects to what came before it, what's coming after it, what this character sounds like, what's the tone of the character, what's the language of the character, the rate of speech, because that sort of starts to speak to musical style and musical pacing and rhythm and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think ultimately we're always doing the same thing, which is just how can we further the story in writing the song? And then we'll start to get into specifics. We'll start to say, okay, what's some language that this character might use? And for this particular song, we actually wrote a version of it that was sort of like a somewhat mediocre version of what we ultimately landed on. That was sort of a little bit more stock sort of number and didn't have really that klezmer jazz vibe and didn't have some of the sort of like nuance that I think we arrived at with the help of our collaborators and notes from people that we were working on. And, you know, somehow it came about the idea of like, we thought it was fun to contrast this sort of sacred holiday with like, when you're in the market for a miracle, sort of this sort of like edgy, sassy sort of feeling. And it felt right for Anna's voice. So we're taking into consideration what the moment wants to feel like, what the character might sound like, who the actor is if we know the actor. We'll hone in on a hook phrase like that, and then we'll start to musicalize it. And generally that's what the process looks like, but every single time it's something different. Sometimes it might be because we know what this character needs to say exactly, so it'll be lyrics first, or sometimes it's just if one of us has any idea at all, we'll just go with that because we're at the 11th hour or we're banging our heads against the wall, and it's like, okay, anybody who has an idea, raise your hand, and we'll go with that because we need to write this song.
What inspired you guys to become involved and lend your talents to this show in the first place? I mean, you mentioned a bit about how you got involved with it to begin with, but I ask because I'm assuming we're all about the same age here, so you might have seen it for the first time on one of those 24-hour TBS marathons. What about the story made you guys want to be a part of the musicalization of it?
Well, I'll say the thing that I think always kills me emotionally is the idea of family and nostalgia and looking back on the past and realizing, how great you had it when you had it. And A Christmas Story really is about a family and the messy, messy moments that families go through. And when you sort of scream and you fight and the turkey gets burned and you're all arguing with each other, it seems like it's the most chaotic, horrible moment in the world. And then, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later, you look back on that and you realize that was actually the best. I think that that's a really universal thing. It doesn't matter, whether you're celebrating Christmas or you're celebrating Hanukkah or you're celebrating any holiday, really. Just the value of family and the fact that this movie depicted families not as they were sort of previously seen at Christmas time, this sort of beautiful, perfect, Christmas with snow falling and everything's lovely and everyone's singing in perfect harmony. It's about the chaos and the mess, and it felt really true to life, and that was something that we wanted to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have your Oscar, you have your Tony, and you have your Grammy. I don't want to jinx you or anything, but if you were to become EGOTs with this, in fact, we could have a whole bunch of EGOTs on the same night because you guys are nominated at the same time as Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice and John Legend. So it could be an EGOT kind of evening. What would that mean for you guys to join that kind of ranks?
I think for us, we're really excited about what it means for the field of musical theater. We have been fans of this art form since we were little kids. The first movie I ever saw, I think I told you this before, was The Little Mermaid in theaters. So I think our whole generation has just been indoctrinated with stories where people sing. And if anything, it feels like it's an indication that multiple mediums are embracing storytelling through music. And that's the most exciting thing for us.
That's the only way that we'd be there and be in that position in the first place, is because there was a film that people liked where there were people singing and that was Oscar worthy, or there was I think it speaks to something larger about audiences and what they're interested in now and what's okay and what's not completely uncool, which I know, I'm sure there were times when we were growing up where we sort of felt I know I did, where musical theater was certainly didn't become obsessed with musical theater because it was cool to be obsessed with musical theater. But now it's not uncool, which is and I use that phrase kind of in a funny way, but what I really mean by that is that it's a really become a valid form of storytelling in ways that it has been in the past, and I think they kind of come in cycles like that. And even for young kids, we're so encouraged to see in theater programs in high schools and things like that. It's not, it's using the term cool because that's what kids say. It is kind of cool to be a theater kid, or at least in a lot of places, and that has not been all the case for sure for always. And so that's cool.
You look at people who are really changing the game and who are opening up the art form, like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Bobby Lopez and Christian Anderson Lopez, who are creating these things that have permeated not just theater culture, but national, part of the zeitgeist, to know all the songs in Moana or Hamilton or Frozen or Coco or whatever it is. And so, we just feel really, really lucky that we're living during a time where, you know, movies and television and theater are all embracing people who sing, and that you want to get inside a character's head and that you feel emotionally connected. And then that's something that is not only okay, but it's even cool, as Justin said.
Right.
It's exciting.
I was one of those musical theater kids too, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. We're validated. We're validated after all these years.
Finally.
Out
Gentlemen,
of the shadows.
thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the Emmy nomination. I look forward to the next musical that you do on stage or screen, TV, on the park, wherever. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. Good to talk to you.
Have a good one.